we're going to be finishing our Expressionist portraits. Last week we began to speak about how different colours might reflect different emotions, and I asked you to do 3 mini mind maps for different facial expressions. Some of you took pictures, some of you used images from online. That is perfectly okay. And you thought of the colours that you would represent that emotion with. And then the very last thing I asked you to do was take a tracing of the image that you were going to choose. I've decided to go for quite a sad portrait, and you've got the outlines of your facial features, the face shape and the hair. I didn't ask you to add any more detail other than that. There are 3 ways that you can add colour to your portrait this week, and I'm going to talk to you about the pros and the negatives to each one, and it depends what you have at home. I don't want you to go out and buy anything. I just want you to use what you've got at home. So hopefully you've got one of these 3 things and you can have a bit of fun and experiment with the different colours. It can be a really relaxing activity, and I can't wait to see how different your portraits come out. So first on, you could use some coloured pencils. You watch, I'm going to spill these all over the table. So any coloured pencils that you have at home, as long as you've got the colours that you intend to use, fab. This one's a little bit trickier because you feel like you have to be neat when you've got a pencil in your hand, whereas with a paintbrush you might feel a bit looser. But this week we don't need to be neat. I'm going to explain that to you a little bit later. Some of you might even have some oil pastels. Okay, so same again. Mine are a little bit used and worn. Okay, so as long as you've got the colours that you intend to use, fab. You can use oil pastels. This does tend to make you a little bit freer, and the thing with oil pastels is the colour is very strong. Because they're so thick when you put them on a piece of paper, they really jump out. And you can blend them with your fingers, you can merge colours together, or you can create a completely new colour. Then the last thing, I'm going to focus a bit more on this further along in the video, but it's paint. Okay, I've set up my palette already because I'm going to show you how to do it. But different paints I've got lying around the house. If you have any, don't worry if you don't have any. Poster paint, acrylic, watercolour would be a little bit tricky because it's quite see-through. So if you did want to put it on top of another colour, you're going to have that colour showing through the back. But just anything you have. So the first one I'm going to talk you through is coloured pencil. If this is what you have, then that's perfectly fine and it's still going to work. We just need to work with our pencil a little bit differently than we would to the other materials that you could use. So gather the colours, or as close to as you can, the colours that you put on your mind map for the certain emotion that you think is in that portrait. For me, I'm using the same portrait throughout, so I'm going to focus on quite a sad image. So I've decided I'm going to use blues, green, anything that's quite cold and doesn't have a lot of red in it. So you will not see orange or what's another one? You wouldn't really see yellow, but I might have a tiny bit in there to make one of the blues a little bit greener. Get those ready. Now, what I'm going to say at every stage, no matter what material you are using, you do not need to be neat. This does not need to be neat. And I'll repeat one more time, you do not need to be neat. I know we have been doing everything else quite neat and quite controlled, but this is Expressionism. So it's about making marks on the paper that aren't always controlled. So if you feel, say, like the emotion anger is quite aggressive, you might do some really aggressive marks on the paper by really moving your hand backwards and forwards. However, if you were doing something quite calm, you might do very soft, like curved lines around your image. It is completely up to you. For me, I think sad is quite, I don't know, I think when you're sad, you're quite bumpy, so I will be doing a lot of like jagged areas. I'm going to focus on the eye section. I'm not going to do the whole portrait because I'm going to show you how to use the others as well, but I'm going to focus on the eye because I think that's a good area. That's where you can be controlled, but also be free at the same time. What I mean by controlled and free at the same time, I'll show you now. I'm going to use my coloured pencil to block in an area. So those lines that I asked you to trace are going to help you to put certain colours in certain places, but you don't need to be completely 100% neat about it. It gives you a rough outline of where you might want that to be. The one thing I would remember is use your darker colours. Use your darker colours to show the darker areas of your portrait. So we've spoke before when you've been shading and applying tone to make your portraits look like they have form, like they're 3D. Do the same with your colours. You don't necessarily have to be as neat about it, but get those, see how I'm being quite, and then, ooh, it looks like I don't have a light blue, so I'm actually going to go back with the white. If you have a white, don't worry if you don't have a white. And I'm just going to add some more to blend that down a little bit. Can you see now how I've got different tones of the same colour in one area, but it makes it look that little bit more 3D. I am actually going to put purple in there. Some of you might not think purple's sad, but it's still quite a cold colour, so I'm going to add it to the darkest area, but then I'm going to use it for the light as well. By pressing really lightly, I'm going to add it to the lighter areas, and then I'm going to put the white over the top to make it quite a lilac. Now, the important thing with this is you can also leave the white, okay? You can have some white areas. You still want to show your shade and highlight. So you still need to bring out those highlights. So say for the brow bone, well, just under the brow bone here, where I'm scribbling backwards and forwards now, I think I'm going to leave that area bright so that you can tell that it's coming off the page. It's not one flat thing. Okay, so I'm being very messy as I go along. That doesn't matter. With the colour pencils, you might find to get that freeness, as a way of explaining it, on the page, that you have to be quite harsh. You have to go backwards and forwards and make some mess. Otherwise it's going to end up too neat. And what happens with it looking too neat is then you'll really focus on the colour and you'll be like, so why doesn't that look right? Whereas if you're using the colours to create tone and shade, it just looks like a coloured portrait, okay? But it's still got that element of like messiness to it. It's not perfect. I want it to exaggerate that she's sad. If you've got a black or something a bit darker than everything else, you can also add that back into there. See how I'm not being perfect there? I am just in the darkest areas again. Let's draw her eyebrow, for example. But I can still see the different areas of her portrait. It's not that messy that I can't tell where her eye would have been. So have fun with it. Look, I'm doing a purple and blue eyebrow. Who says you can do a purple and blue eyebrow? It doesn't matter, okay? I'm saying you can actually. Okay, so just have fun with it. You can get that effect. If you look back in the PowerPoint, I've shared a picture of Françoise Nielli's work. And although hers is messy, there's lots of layers, there's lots of shapes in the image, you can still see that it's a portrait. And you'll be able to do this with the pencil too. You just find that you might have to be a little messier than your normal work just to free yourself up. It doesn't need to be perfect. I've changed the shape of the eyebrows slightly. Doesn't matter. Okay, so there we go. And keep doing that until you get your whole portrait. And then upload it to the Google Classroom area. The next one I'm going to show you is oil pastel. Right, so the next one we're going to look at is working with oil pastel on your Expressionist portrait. You are going to need to get your colours that you would have used for your emotion, get them set up just so that you can grab them, because you'll find with this kind of work that you keep going backwards and forwards, grabbing different things at the same time. It's about like that layering, okay? You might find that you're making new colours. I will talk through the basic steps just in case you did skip through the pencil video, which is completely fine. I'm going to start off with a lighter colour. Where my mid-tones would have been, so the colours in between light and dark, I'm going to start to add my oil pastel. Those lines that you put down on the paper already are really going to help you know where to put these different colours. I'm going to add a little bit in the eye. Then you might find that you're going to go in with a darker colour. It's a little bit harder with oil pastel to get clean lines, so you might find that you have to make it on one of the edges. So you might, on a bit of your piece of paper, scribble it so you get a nice edge. Yeah, there we go. Can you see that point I've created? All right, so keep going. It's not going to look perfect straight away. Okay, let's block in that eyebrow. Oh, this really looks messy. The messier the better, okay? In the colour pencil drawing, I was talking about how this is expressionism. So one of the things of expressionism is not sticking to your traditional way of drawing. So the marks can be a lot freer. They don't need to be neat. It's about you choosing as you're going along with the work, you just having fun with it. Put some music on if you want to, and just enjoy what you're doing. Can you see how, as I'm going backwards and forwards, this area as well, I also mentioned about the lights and darks. So the areas that you would have done dark, probably just a suggestion to use your darkest colour. And the areas that you would have done lighter, to either leave white or to use your lightest colour. This helps keep the form in the portrait. So instead of just using any colour anywhere, using the darks in the dark and the lights in the lights, it helps the portrait not look flat. So it still looks realistic. Even though it's going to be a blue portrait, you can still see that there is a portrait under there, and that I did try and make it look 3D. Right, with oil pastels, you can see now I've got quite a chunky mess that's on my page. You can start to blend those areas. It would look good actually if you didn't blend some of it, because it does add a really good texture. You might find that if you've got coloured pencils too, you want to go back and add a bit more with that coloured pencil instead of the oil pastel. But you can use the black, really bring out the different areas of the eye. It just might take a little bit of going backwards and forwards to really bring it out. I'll show you quickly what it could look like with the pencil on it as well. Let me get my purple on my... Right, so, see? They work together. You might just have some areas that are a little bit scratchy than others, but texture is completely fine. But what the pencil does, it does help you to bring out the different shapes that you can see in the portrait. It helps you blend it all together. Right, the next one I'm going to show you last is paint. I'm not going to lie, this is going to be a bit fun, a bit free. It's unpredictable with paint, okay? With colour and pencils and oil pastels, you have it here, and it's a dry, apart from the oil in the oil pastel, it's quite a dry medium. So when it's there, it's not going to travel that far, whereas paint, as you know, is a liquid. So there's a chance for it to go everywhere, but we're going to try, okay? Right, and finally for the painting stage, if this is what you're going to work with, then remember you need to do some cardboard pieces. I'll show you why in just a second. Start mixing your colours already if you had to mix them like I did. If you're squeezing them straight out of the tube, that's fine. But I've got some different shades of the colour that I'm going to use, and I've made up some of my own. I've got a really nice green over here. Right, also I've got my paintbrush and water. In the other videos, I've explained that we're creating a portrait that isn't controlled, okay? It's not going to look like your neat normal portrait. This is the technique that is going to look most like that Francois Nielli example that I put in the PowerPoint for you, where you can see the rectangles of paint that have been applied on top of each other to get the desired effect. Before we start, I am going to say to you, if you want to use a paintbrush, that is perfectly fine. If you want to use the cardboard, like I'm going to show you in a second, that is fine too. There is not a way of doing it. It is completely up to you. Expressionism is about freedom as you're doing something, and if it looks too controlled, then it's not really expressing how you feel or how you want that emotion to come through the portrait. So the second thing that I'm going to mention, I think I just said second, but we'll go with it, okay, is you want your dark areas of the portrait that would have been dark anyway to have your darkest colour. The same with your lightest area. You want the lightest areas to have your lightest colour. That's so when we look at it afterwards, you can see the shadows and you can see what's either further away or things that stand out a bit more, like the eyes. Okay, so it doesn't look flat. At the moment, it's a completely flat drawing because the only thing that's there is the outlines, whereas when we add that paint in different shades, we're going to bring it up, we're going to bring it down. It's going to work that way. So the very first thing I'm going to do is show you how to use this piece of cardboard. I'm so excited how to show you, okay? So just cut off, doesn't have to be a certain thickness, okay? We're using cardboard because it's a bit thicker than paper, so what happens when you put water on paper? It flops around, okay? Whereas with cardboard, it keeps its stiffness. You might find that you want to start off really small, or you actually, I'll show you where you could do it with your paintbrush. Make sure you've got that bit of tissue by hand so you can get rid of excess paint or excess water. You could get your paintbrush first. The areas that are darker, you could decide, actually, I'm going to use my paintbrush first just to get the areas that are darker of my portrait. I'm only going to show you the eye, because once you've got one of these facial features done, you can do the whole portrait. It works the same way. So the darker area is darker. You usually have a bit of darkness here from the shadow of your eye, maybe a bit by your eyebrow. You could do your eyebrow if you wanted to. Okay, so if you did want to do it with your paintbrush, you can still be quite free. Can you see that texture that's come through with the paintbrush? But the other way I'm going to show you is with this piece of card. What you're going to want to do, this is the scary bit because it's like the first thing you're putting on. So I'm going to go straight for the dark. You want to scoop up a little bit of that colour. Can you see? Not too much where, look, I'm going to show you. Please don't do this, but it's just an example. If I shake that, it's not going to fall off. Okay, I've still got control over the paint. Not too much. You can always add more. So I'm going to go in, ooh, and I'm going to add my first little block of colour. They don't have to be neat. This technique is all about building up those shapes. I've almost put my arm in the paint. Okay, at the moment it really doesn't look neat, so I might change to my smaller piece of card. I'm going to add a lighter area because I think I've done a little bit too dark here. And can you see how thick they are? The thick is good because what happens is it makes it stand out that bit more. You can be really neat with these. Although it gives a messy effect, you can follow small areas of the portrait. You don't have to. So then I'm gonna, and what you can do is you can either wipe it off on the palette you're using. Again, if you do need something to put it on, try and put it on card if you haven't got a plastic tray like I have, because if you put it on paper, you're gonna end up having just splodges all over your table. We don't want that. So I'm going to use the light green. Just wipe it off on a piece of tissue. And I'm going to start adding areas in that I want a little bit. Did I make a light purple? I didn't, did I? Well, I can make a light blue very quickly. So, again, the lighter areas are going to be your lightest. Doesn't matter if it looks messy. Okay, I'm actually going to use the paintbrush for the eyeball because it's a very round shape. I don't want it to, oh, I've just got paint on the table. I don't want it to warp too much. Right, so I've got the colour that I want to use on my paintbrush for the eyeball. Just, you don't have to be 100% neat. You might find that the colours that you've used in the other parts of the portrait have started drifting their way into the area you're working. Okay. I'm going to use my black again after I shade. Your eyeball, though you may not believe it, has actually got some shade in there too. It's not all white, if you've noticed. That might have made it look very strange for a second. Right, I'm going to get my black because I feel like I need a darker area. And I'm going to very carefully take some of that paint off my paintbrush. And I'm going to you see how my colours are starting to mix? That's fine. Doesn't matter. The messier the better. So can you see there's still an eyeball there, even though there is a whole load of different textures from that paint and it's starting to all, in different areas, blend together. I'm just going to do that eyebrow a little bit darker. Okay. I'm just going to do the face around it so you can see, because this one's a little bit harder. It might take you that little bit longer to get to the designated way that you want it to be, because you're taking like more media and laying it up on top of each other. If I show you, I'm just going to make this area, this is the forehead so it's quite light anyway, but I'm going to take that light colour, that's going to show a bit of shadow here. For the hair, I'm probably going to just go really heavy with that blue. Yeah, let's be really brave with this. Okay, she's got her hair up, so it's quite messy. I might decide that I want to use some purple in with that too. You don't have to use the same colours in same areas. It's all about the different darknesses and the lighter areas. That's a shadow on her neck that I might come back to later. Let's just do the bottom of her cheek. And as you keep going, it will build off that page. Okay, just keep it going. You don't know what it's going to end up like, and that is the beauty of it, okay? Because I'm trying to get you just a little bit looser than you normally would work. I don't want to see your perfect portraits. It's never going to happen when you're working with Expressionism. Okay, there's always going to be that element of free, or they've jerked the hand really quick. Okay, just remember that as you're working. I can't wait to see what you come up with. Please upload this to the Google Classroom when you're finished. Good luck. Bye.